I never thought I'd be the kind of person to date a teacher, let alone my own. It all started during my senior year of high school, a year I had hoped would be normal, but turned out to be anything but. I was always the quiet type, the girl who kept to herself, studying hard but never standing out. My friends were few but close, and my family was the usual mix of support and pressure to do well. Then Mr. Daniels showed up. He was the new English teacher, young, probably in his early 30s, with an easy smile and this way of making literature feel alive. I liked that about him. I liked his passion and how he seemed to see potential in everyone, even me. We connected over books and writing, and he encouraged me to join the school's literary magazine. At first, it was just student and teacher. I'd stay after class to ask questions or get advice on essays, and he was always patient and kind. But slowly, things started to change. I noticed how he looked at me when I read my work aloud, the way his eyes lingered a second longer. I felt a flutter in my chest that I couldn't quite explain. One afternoon, after a long discussion about poetry, he asked if I wanted to grab a coffee. I hesitated, knowing it wasn't typical, but said yes. That coffee turned into 2, then 3. We talked about everything, not just school or writing, but life, hopes, fears. It felt like we were two people who truly understood each other, even though I was his student. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. I kept telling myself it was just admiration, but deep down, I wanted more. I was confused, scared, and excited all at once. I wondered if he felt the same. I worried about what people would think, what would happen if anyone found out. Still, the more time we spent together, the harder it was to ignore my feelings. I started to notice little things. Texts from him after school hours, jokes only we shared, the way he remembered small details about me. Then one evening, as I was leaving the library, he caught up to me and said, "I know this isn't easy or typical, but I have feelings for you." My heart raced. I didn't know what to say at first. The world seemed to tilt. But after a moment, I admitted, "I feel the same." We agreed to keep it quiet, to figure out what this meant without ruining everything. The line between student and teacher blurred, and I was both terrified and thrilled by the secret we shared. I didn't know where this would lead, but I was ready to find out. That was the beginning of a complicated, intense, and unforgettable journey. Keeping our relationship a secret was harder than I imagined. We were cautious, no public displays, no overt messages during school hours, but the tension was always there, electric and constant. Every stolen glance in class or quiet message after school made my heart pound like crazy. I started to see him differently, not just as my teacher, but as someone who genuinely cared about me beyond the classroom. We talked for hours about how to keep things safe, about the risks and consequences if anyone found out. The reality was scary. If people knew, he could lose his job, and I could face serious backlash. But despite the fear, we couldn't stay away from each other. Sometimes we met at quiet cafes or parks, places where no one would recognize us. Those moments felt like a different world, a chance to be just Sophie and Daniel, not student and teacher. I started to feel alive in ways I never had before. My grades improved because he was not only my teacher, but my biggest supporter. He pushed me to believe in myself and my writing like no one else had. Yet, the secrecy was exhausting. I was constantly anxious someone would notice, whisper, or worse, tell someone else. At school, I felt paranoid, especially when people started to comment on how close I seemed to him. I told myself to stay strong, to focus on what made me happy. Sometimes I questioned if this was right. I was still a teenager, and he was my teacher, but the way he looked at me and the way I felt when I was with him made those doubts feel distant. One day, our secret almost came crashing down. A student caught us exchanging a quick message, and rumors started swirling. I could see the judgment in people's eyes, the suspicion in their whispers. It was terrifying. Daniel was called into a meeting with the principal. I didn't know what would happen next, but I prayed our secret would stay safe. Thankfully, no one had concrete proof, and the principal warned him to keep things professional. It was a harsh reminder of how fragile our situation was. After that, we agreed to be even more careful. The thrill of sneaking around was replaced by a heavy weight of responsibility. Still, our feelings only grew stronger. We found comfort in each other, a bond that went beyond the typical student-teacher dynamic. We shared dreams about the future, about leaving this town, starting fresh, and living honestly. But deep down, I knew reality was closing in. I was starting to understand how complicated love could be, especially when it crossed lines no one expected to be crossed. The risk felt worth it because he made me feel seen, loved, and alive. I just hoped we could hold on to that without losing everything. As time went on, the pressure around us kept mounting. I felt it in every whispered conversation, every sideways glance from classmates and teachers alike. The secret we'd held so carefully was becoming harder to protect. Daniel started acting more distant at school, probably worried about getting caught or hurting me. It was painful to see him so guarded when all I wanted was to be open with him. Outside school, though, our connection deepened. We spent weekends together, away from prying eyes, talking about everything, our pasts, our fears, our hopes for a life that felt impossible right now. I learned things about him that no student was supposed to know. He told me about his struggles with being taken seriously as a young teacher, about feeling lonely sometimes, and about the guilt that gnawed at him for falling for a student. I understood how complicated it was for him, and it made me love him more. But the world wasn't waiting for us to figure things out in peace. One afternoon, while we were meeting in a quiet cafe, a classmate from school spotted us. The news spread like wildfire. Suddenly, the secret was out. I was scared and overwhelmed by the backlash. Some people were angry, others disappointed, and some just curious. Daniel was called in again, this time for a serious investigation. I was devastated. I felt responsible for everything that was happening, even though I knew deep down it wasn't just my fault. Our relationship was scrutinized, judged harshly, and labeled as inappropriate. I felt alone and confused, caught between my feelings for Daniel and the reality of what society said was wrong. My parents found out too, and their disappointment crushed me. They tried to understand but couldn't hide the fear for my future and the anger toward Daniel. I struggled with guilt, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. Daniel and I talked about ending things to protect me, but neither of us wanted to give up. We promised to face whatever came together, even if the world turned against us. The investigation lasted weeks. Daniel was suspended from teaching, and rumors followed me wherever I went. School felt like a battlefield. I wanted to scream but also hide. I missed the simple days when we could talk about books and dreams without fear. Through it all, Daniel was my anchor. We found strength in each other's support, leaning on late-night calls and secret meetings. I realized love wasn't just about happiness, it was about fighting for what felt right, even when everything else was against you. Slowly, I started to stand up for myself. I wrote about my feelings in the literary magazine, using words to explain my story without naming names. It was cathartic and gave me a voice when I felt silenced. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure: my heart belonged to Daniel, no matter the cost. After Daniel's suspension, life became a blur of uncertainty and tension. He couldn't teach, and I was stuck in school with everyone watching me like I was some kind of scandal. The judgment was brutal, but I tried to keep my head up. We agreed to take things slow, to stay out of the spotlight until things calmed down, but that didn't make it easier. Our relationship changed, less secretive excitement and more careful planning around fears of exposure. We met mostly outside town, in places where no one knew us. I saw a different side of Daniel then, the vulnerable, scared man behind the confident teacher persona. He was worried about his career, about what people thought of him, but mostly about me and how this would affect my future. Those moments reminded me how much love could hurt but also heal. My parents were still upset, and our conversations often ended in tears and silence. They wanted me to focus on my future and forget about Daniel. I wanted to scream that I couldn't just erase my feelings like that. School was tough, but I found refuge in writing. I poured everything into my stories, using the pain and hope to create something real. The literary magazine became my safe space, and surprisingly, some teachers supported me quietly. Despite everything, I graduated with honors. It felt bittersweet because Daniel wasn't there at graduation. He was still suspended, waiting to see if he could get his job back. After graduation, we finally had some freedom. Daniel and I started dating openly but cautiously, knowing the past would always follow us. We moved to a nearby city so he could apply for teaching positions without the stigma from our town. It wasn't easy starting over. He had to rebuild his career, and I had to figure out who I was outside the shadow of this story. But we had each other, and that made the hard days bearable. We talked about the future a lot. College for me, a fresh start for him. We dreamed about a life where we didn't have to hide or apologize for our love. I won't lie, it was complicated. There were moments when the past haunted us, messages from angry strangers, awkward encounters with former classmates, and the constant worry that someone would try to ruin what we had. But those moments made us stronger. We learned to communicate, to trust, and to fight for what mattered. Looking back, I realize how much I grew through this experience. I learned about love's messy reality, the risks, the fears, but also the joy of finding someone who sees you, truly sees you. Daniel wasn't perfect, and neither was I. But we were honest and committed, and that made all the difference. I don't regret any of it because it taught me to listen to my heart, even when the world shouts otherwise. This story isn't just about a girl who started dating her teacher. It's about finding yourself, standing up for love, and learning that sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most meaningful places. Years have passed since those high school days, but the memories of how Daniel and I met and everything we went through still shape who I am. After moving away, Daniel eventually found a teaching position in a new town where no one knew our story. Slowly, he rebuilt his career and earned the respect he deserved. For me, college was a fresh start, a place where I could explore my own identity outside the shadow of our past. We kept supporting each other through every step, long distance at times, navigating the challenges of young adulthood while still holding onto what made us strong. People often ask if I regret dating my teacher. The answer is complicated. There were moments filled with fear, doubt, and heartbreak. But there were also moments of joy, growth, and connection I never expected. I learned that love isn't always neat or easy. It's messy, imperfect, and sometimes controversial. But it's also powerful and transformative. Our relationship changed me. It taught me to be brave, to trust my feelings even when others doubted me, and to stand up for what I believed was right. Daniel showed me kindness and understanding when I needed it most, and that made all the difference. We are still together now, building a life based on honesty and respect. We don't hide anymore, and we face the world with a story that many wouldn't understand, but that we own with pride. Looking back, I know our love was risky and unconventional, but it was real. It challenged me in ways I never imagined, and it made me stronger. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this: love can come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes it's worth the risk to follow your heart. No matter the judgments or fears, being true to yourself is the bravest thing you can do. So yes, I started dating my teacher. And no, it wasn't easy. But it was the most real and important experience of my life.